Hi, I'm Mary, I'm 81 and I've suffered from emetophobia since about the age of 6 and suffered very badly, I would say. But recently I was lucky enough to be looking onto the internet and I came across the Thrive website and I bought the book Cure Your Emetophobia and Thrive. I started to read it and I thought, this sounds good, because up until then I'd had various types of psychological treatment. None of them made any sense, none of them did any good. So I started to work through the book. I found it quite hard going, if I'm honest. And at one stage I tended to let it go. And then I contacted Rob. And Rob came and gave me a session. And that got me back into realising that I'd got to really make the effort, which I did. And I worked through the book. I had reminders to remind myself every day of things that I'd got to do, things that I'd got to stop doing. And I think I can now fairly say that at 81, after 75 years of suffering, I'm cured. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I picked up some tummy bug at a party. And although I wasn't sick, a couple of times I felt so sick that I was sure I was going to be. And there was no panic. There were none of the tactics that I would normally get up to. One of them, I was in bed and I just thought, oh, I can't be bothered with all the aggro that I used to do. I just turned over and went to sleep. And believe you me, after being terrified of vomiting for 75 years, it's unbelievable. I can hardly believe it myself, but I know it. I've stopped all my avoidance tactics. I used to carry Alka-Seltzers always in my handbag and diazepam tablets. If I was going out for a meal, I would always take a diazepam tablet first. I chucked them out of my handbag, which has given me a bit more space for more useful things. And if I felt sick, and if I was at home, I would lay on the bed and I'd prop myself up with loads of pillows, because I had a theory that sick would be harder to come up if you were sitting upright than laying down. Again, now, if I wake up and feel sick, I just don't bother. So it can be hard work. It takes effort, but boy, it's worth it. It really is worth it. And I think back now, even as a tiny child, I can remember if a kid was sick in class, I'd rush out of the room. And afterwards, of course, I'd have to explain myself, and I would tell the teacher that it had made me feel sick and that I didn't want to make a mess in the classroom and that I'd gone down to the loo. And then I'd never go back into the class until I know that they cleared everything up. And this went on throughout my school life. And incidentally, I never told anybody. My parents didn't know. They worried because I wouldn't eat. And that led to all sorts of complications. Because, of course, I thought the more I ate, the more there'd be in me to be sick. Anyway, as I got older, left school, had to think about where my future was going to be. I knew I would not get married because I couldn't face morning sickness. Anyway, I decided to train as a teacher, and this I did, and started teaching in a junior school. And basically, I loved it, but you'd get a kid come up to me, put his hand up and say, "Please miss, I feel sick." And other kids in the school You all know, you've all been to junior schools. Occasionally there'd be little bits of vomit on the stairs or in the corridor. And in the end I had to pack the job in. I just couldn't stand the sort of terror, really, that I was going through. Even had one day when a mother brought in a very sickly looking little boy, and she said, "Will you keep an eye on John? He's been sick all night and I didn't want him to come to school, but he insists, so please keep an eye on him." And you just imagine how I felt, and I kept looking at him and thinking, oh my God, don't let him be sick. So anyway, I had to give that up. And then I decided I'd have to go and see a psychiatrist. So I called at a local hospital, made an appointment, saw this man. I didn't tell him that I was afraid of being sick. I told him I had panic attacks. And he arranged to get me into a big mental hospital down in Surrey. And at first I just had group therapy, which did nothing. Then I was shifted to what they called the main hospital, where we used to say all the loonies went. So I thought, right, I'm a loony now. And I had the most intriguing psychiatrist whose session with me was, everybody's sick sometimes, it's nothing to be frightened of, and that was the end of his session. I then had a weird session where they used to make me sniff ether until I was nearly unconscious, and then they'd fire questions at me. But apparently I wasn't cooperating and we got nowhere, so I left the hospital. And because my parents said they weren't having somebody of my age living at home for free and that I'd got to pay them, I got desperate. I didn't know what to do, and I swallowed a bottle of tablets, ended up stomach pumped in the local hospital, straight back to the big mental hospital, and then had a most entertaining treatment called Freudian dream analysis, which may be good, but personally I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. How it cured anybody of anything, I don't know. But I was in and out of that hospital for about 4 years. And then I went on something called a rehabilitation course. And in fact, I was actually registered as disabled. Only in those days you got a little green card, and I took mine home, tore it up and threw it away. Went on this rehabilitation course, and they taught me shorthand, typing, bookkeeping, and I got a job locally as a secretary. Had to lie at the interview and invent what I'd been doing for 4 years, and managed, and I got the job, and actually the job progressed. We were taken over and I did very, very well, which I think helped to give me self-esteem. But all the time, every day, it was a fight to get up, a fight to go to work. Looking back now, I just don't know how I did it. It's unbelievable, the fear, the pressure. But then I met this lovely chap, and I had no intention of getting married. But I met this man and I fell for him. So I had to tell him about my fear and that there is no way I'd have children. And he accepted that, and we got married and had a very happy life. But in 1981 I got ovarian cancer, and it was quite serious, and in 1981 things weren't as advanced as they are now. And after the operations they wanted me to have chemotherapy. I refused point blank. My consultant said, if you don't have chemotherapy, you'll die. And my answer was, well, I'd rather die, because in those days chemotherapy was a very sick-making thing. It's not like today. I would have to go into hospital once a month for 3 days, and I would be sick for 3 days. If any of you have got emetophobia, you'll know that that's just not on. So I won't go through all the ins and outs. They sent me off to see a psychiatrist who was no help in getting over my fear. Anyway, eventually I got over the cancer. And I don't know, life was just a total struggle. I felt as though I was always carrying a huge weight on my shoulders. And I thought, God, it must be wonderful to be able to chuck this weight away. But anyway, I jogged on, and then, unfortunately, just a couple of years ago, I lost my husband. And I think that daunted my self-esteem, because being retired and no job and having no husband to care for, I felt totally useless. I probably still am totally useless, if the truth be known. But I felt now I might have 20 years left, I don't know, of active life. And I have to get rid of this phobia. Just to think of having a few years before I die of peace, being able to enjoy life. And that's when I found Thrive. I found Rob, who is an inspiration. He'll say he's not, but he is. And here I am now. The panic's gone. Just the fact that every day I'd be walking about thinking, do I feel sick? I mean, that was quite a common thought, and of course that can make you feel sick. And all I can say is, after 75 years of that, it's gone. I can feel sick. I can be like other people, not panic, not rush for Alka-Seltzers. So I wouldn't say it's easy at all. I think you have to persevere, you have to work hard, but it's there. It's all in the book, plus any other help you can get. Do it. Do it. Don't keep putting up with such a rubbish fear.